My son laughed when he saw the small wrapped box in my hands. 200 guests, a string quartet, and his voice carrying across the courtyard like a microphone he did not need. "Dad, did you shop the clearance aisle?" People chuckled. Cameras hovered. I felt the laugh land like a coin flicked at a beggar. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you are listening from. It was Saturday, November 23rd, Austin, Texas. Late afternoon light slid along the glass of the terrace on Barton Creek and made the white chairs look like rows of teeth. I had parked my old truck by the service entrance at 2:45 p.m. I carried the box with both hands because my ribs still remembered a surgery from spring, and good habits last longer than pride. The box was small on purpose. Inside it was only an envelope. The real weight was ink and a notary stamp. Jason straightened his tux and leaned into the joke. "That all you could afford, Dad?" The groomsman smirked. Someone I did not know filmed the moment with a steady phone and a steady smile. I did not give the crowd anything more. I just smiled the way men do when they have learned to measure a room and save their breath. A planner in black with a headset pointed me to the gift table. The table groaned under gold foil, satin ribbons, and a few boxes big enough to hold a washing machine. My small square looked like a single brick among marble pillars. I set it at the back, next to a card box with a slot on top and a sign that read, "Gifts and Well Wishes." I slid the envelope to the far edge of the box so it would not bend. Then I smoothed the paper like a man tying a bowline. Guests in dark suits threaded the patio. Laughter rose and fell with the music. I stood in the shade beside a heater that hissed. Diane, the bride's aunt, paused by me with a stack of programs. "You must be the father of the groom," she said. "I am." She looked at the small box, and then at my face, and said, "You look like the only person who remembers what this day is about." She moved on without waiting for an answer. The remark stayed. At the bar, Jason threw his head back and laughed at something a groomsman said about cold beer and hot markets. He works in finance. He has learned how to make numbers sound like weather reports. When he caught me watching, he lifted his glass and mouthed, "Love you," then turned away before the words could stick. I stepped inside to the lobby, where the air smelled like lilies and furniture polish. On a side table sat a leather binder with the seating chart. I traced my finger to table 12, far from the head table, near the kitchen doors, the kind of spot where servers pass with trays and nobody notices who sits there. I took my chair assignment and slipped it into my breast pocket, next to my heart pills and a folded napkin. The officiant, Pastor Lee, found me by the window. He shook my hand and looked me in the eyes long enough to take a measurement. "Good to see you, Frank." He let go and said a line only I could hear. "Truth always finds the microphone." Then he headed toward the garden arch, where the florist was fixing one last flower with a pin and a prayer. I walked back outside, through a wash of violin music, to the edge of the courtyard. The oak leaves had turned the color of old pennies. The wind moved them without noise. I thought about my late wife and the lake house we had saved for, with overtime checks and packed lunches. I thought about the words Jason used when he talked about money and legacy and image. I thought about the envelope inside the small box and the lesson it carried. When the planner called guests to their seats, I took one last look at the gift table. The small box sat neat among the bright packages. No one would choose it for a photo. No one would point to it and guess its worth. That was the point. I took my place in row 3 and folded my hands. I did not pray for payback. I prayed for clarity, the kind that does not raise a voice, the kind that unfolds a letter and lets the paper speak. Tomorrow he would say he never saw it coming. But right then, with the sun low and the quartet playing, I saw the whole night clearly. Next, I will tell you what I heard the week before that turned a simple gift into a boundary. It started a week before the wedding, on a cold Sunday evening, the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. I had stopped by Jason's new condo to drop off an old family photo his mother had framed before she passed. It was of the three of us at the lake house, standing barefoot on the dock, her hand on his shoulder, my arm around them both. He wasn't home yet, but the door was cracked open. I heard voices from inside, his and another man's. I shouldn't have listened. But sometimes truth walks right up to your door, whether you invite it in or not. "She's nervous about your dad showing up," the man said. Jason laughed. "He'll bring something small, like one of those hand tools from his workshop. My old man thinks memories pay bills. But don't worry, it's just optics. The property's already practically mine." "Which one?" "The lake house. He doesn't even know I've been using it for meetings. It's in my name soon as we file the marriage paperwork." I stood in the hallway, heartbeat thick in my ears. He kept talking, fast, like someone pitching a client. I told the planner to put him at a side table. "He hates that fancy stuff anyway. It'll look generous." My hand shook, not from anger, but from disbelief. I left the photo on his console table face down. On the drive home, headlights streaked past like ghosts. Every mile hurt more than the last. When I got home, the porch light was still on. The chair beside the front door creaked the way it used to when my wife sat there with her coffee. I could almost see her there. "Don't let pride hurt you," she'd say. "Let it protect you." Inside, I sat at the kitchen table with the mail spread out in front of me. Bills, coupons, a tax reminder for the lake property due December 1st. Jason had never once paid that tax. I'd covered it every year, quietly, even when my back gave out and I had to sell my tools. The receipt from last year sat under a magnet on the fridge. $2,284. $12 paid to Travis County. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. My son saw that house as a trophy. His mother had seen it as a refuge. That night, I couldn't sleep. I turned on the small lamp by my recliner and stared at the ceiling fan turning slow. I thought about the wedding invitation that came 3 months earlier. Ivory cardstock, gold trim, RSVP line that read, "Formal attire requested." No mention of love, just an event. At 3 a.m., I went to the garage. The air smelled like sawdust and oil. I opened the old cedar chest where I kept my wife's files. Inside were her bank ledgers, her notes in neat handwriting, and the original trust paperwork for the house. I read the first line, "Joint property of Frank and Margaret Hanley, held in survivorship until the death of either party, thereafter transferable at discretion of surviving spouse." It meant it was still mine, completely. Every plank, every nail. Jason's claim was words, not law. By sunrise, I had made coffee and written out a rough note. "To the next owner of the lake house, treat it with care. It was built with hands, not money." I folded it, but didn't sign it. Not yet. At 10 o'clock, I called Marion Cooper, my accountant since the 70s. "Marion, I need to make a change," I said. She paused. "Change how?" "Ownership." "Before the wedding." Her voice lowered. "Frank, are you sure? I'm done being embarrassed for living simple." She told me to come by on Tuesday. We'd need notarization, a witness, and clear intent. I said I had plenty of intent left. That night I stood in front of the mirror, holding the wedding invitation. I looked at my reflection. Gray hair, tired eyes, clean shirt. I had raised a man who thought the size of a gift measured the weight of love. Somewhere along the way, I must have taught him the wrong math. I folded the invitation back into its envelope, placed it on the counter, and looked out the window. The porch light flickered once, then steadied. I whispered to the empty kitchen, "All right, son, let's see what you value when numbers don't add up." The plan wasn't revenge. It was record-keeping. My wife used to say that justice is just paperwork that feels right in your heart. She was about to be right again. The next morning, I ironed my shirt, packed the trust folder, and left for Marion's office. I didn't feel angry anymore, just ready. Tuesday, November 19th, 9 a.m. Billy's Diner, West 6th Street. The place smelled like frying oil and burnt coffee, the kind of honest smells that have no time for pretense. Marian was already there, a stack of papers in front of her, and her reading glasses folded on the napkin. She wore a cardigan that matched the drizzle outside. When she smiled, it was the smile of someone who had seen bad plans and good paperwork. I set the trust folder on the table. It made a small thud against the formica. Marian took out the photocopy of the original deed and the packet she had prepared. A new quitclaim deed, the Quiet Foundation's trust documents, notary pages, a witness signature form, and a typed letter I had not yet read that began, "To the next steward of the lake house." "You sure about the language?" she asked, pouring 2 cups of diner coffee. I told her the truth, short and calm. "He thinks the house is an asset to display. It is not. It is a place my wife used to go to heal. I want it to stay a refuge for people who need it." We went line by line. Marian explained legal steps without drama. The deed had to be executed properly, notarized, and then delivered to the trust and to the county clerk for recording. She warned me that I could sign it that day, but recording could take time. "We can set the effective transfer to be immediate upon delivery to the trust," she said. "That way, even if someone screams about timing, the intent and the paperwork are unassailable." She had prepared a short letter to tuck into the envelope that would go on the gift table. It was not a slam, it was a statement. It read in plain script, "Son, this house was your mother's dream. It will now shelter those who need it most. Love, Dad." I felt my throat go tight and wiped it with the back of my hand. Then we planned logistics. Marian would hold the original signed deed in her office safe until after the ceremony. She would notarize my signature at 11:30 a.m. on Thursday the 21st, and it would be witnessed by Pastor Lee, who had agreed to be present at the wedding. The trust documents were already prepared and had a banking letter attached showing the trust account established at Hill Country Credit Union to pay immediate property taxes and maintenance. The numbers were all there. The yearly tax amount, $2,684.12. The maintenance trust fund initial deposit, $15,000. The trustee fee schedule. Marian slid me a receipt. Notary fee, 35 euros. Document copies, 12.2 serve. Parking meter, 4 twarts. The little arithmetic of doing the right thing made me oddly comforted. We rehearsed the envelope. She suggested I tuck in the brief letter and the notarized deed with a photocopy of the trust acceptance sheet, and notate at the bottom, "Property transferred to Quiet Foundation's Trust on this date." The photocopy would remain on the gift card table to show guests the physical paper without risking the original. "Make sure the videographer catches the opening," Marian said, and I realized how much this day would already be filmed. "I will give the original to the trust and record a short notarized affidavit about your intent," she added. "Keep a copy in your folder and in the safe deposit box," Pastor Lee called as we finished. He agreed to stand close during toasts so he could mention stewardship and legacy in his brief words. Diane, the bride's aunt, volunteered to help me place the envelope at the last possible moment so it could not be moved or mishandled. That small network of allies felt like scaffolding around a fragile wall. I signed the deed at the diner counter, in the presence of Marian, who watched my hand not shake. The pen felt ordinary in my fingers. Notary stamp, blue ink, 2 copies initialed. The deed had my name, the legal description of the lake house parcel, the Quiet Foundation's trust as grantee, and the phrase "transfer" in fee simple. Marian slid 1 copy into a tamper-evident envelope labeled "Original Deed" and sealed it with her office stamp. "I will keep this in my safe until you tell me otherwise," she said. "And we will file the deed with the county on Monday morning after the weekend. The trust will be the public owner." We paid, wrote the receipts, and I put them into the red folder. Coffee 3.25, parking 4.3, notary 35 €. Small numbers, small confirmations. Marian suggested I prepare one more thing: a photo of the property, a short paragraph about my wife, and a note asking the new stewards to treat the house as she had intended. Personal context helps people see value beyond value, she said. On my way out, she pressed a copy of the notarized deed into my hand. "This is heavy," she said lightly. "Not because of the paper, but because of the meaning. Make sure you do the quiet thing well. You are not burning bridges. You are building a harbor." I drove home slowly, the city moving around me like a film I had seen before. The deed sat in my glove compartment in a manila envelope stamped with Marion's blue office ink. The red folder on the passenger seat felt like a heart beating steady. I rehearsed what I might say if anyone asked. I also rehearsed silence. That night, I slipped the photocopy into the plain envelope I had wrapped in the small box. I tucked in the short paragraph about my wife and smoothed the paper with care. I did not want to make a spectacle. I wanted a sentence on paper and a future for the house. The original deed would remain under Marion's lock until the right legal steps were taken. That was the difference between lashing out and changing something for good. I placed the sealed envelope in my coat pocket and lay awake with the ceiling fan's slow spin counting down the hours. The plan had begun. The rest was patience and paperwork and the kind of quiet courage my wife used to call stubbornness. Thursday came cold and gray, the kind of day that keeps secrets well. I drove to Marion's office with the radio off and the envelope sitting on the passenger seat. It felt heavier than paper. It felt like closure. At 11:20 a.m. sharp, Marion met me at the front desk. Pastor Lee arrived 5 minutes later, shaking rain off his coat. He signed as witness. The notary, a young woman with a calm voice, read every line out loud before stamping it. The sound of the seal pressing down was final, like the click of a safe door closing. Marion handed me 2 things, a copy for my records and a folded note on her letterhead. "This confirms transfer of title to the Quiet Foundations Trust, effective immediately upon delivery." I tucked it in my inside pocket. "Keep this safe," she said. "If anyone questions you later, just show them the date." "I don't plan to explain anything," I told her. She smiled. "That's usually the best explanation." I left her office and drove straight to a small store near South Lamar. I bought a simple white card, blank inside, and a sheet of wrapping paper the color of sand. At the counter, the cashier asked if it was for a wedding. "Yes," I said, "a very special one." That night, I sat at my kitchen table under the yellow light and wrote one short line inside the card. "To Jason, this gift carries more than it seems. Love, Dad." I folded the trust copy and the letter about his mother into the envelope. The paper made a soft rustle like leaves falling. I slid it into the small box, wrapped it neatly, and tied it with a plain white ribbon. It looked simple, almost plain enough to be invisible, just how I wanted it. At the same time, I went online and made a payment to the wedding caterer. The invoice had come through the email chain Jason copied me on months earlier. Total amount, $987 plus $45. I covered it and printed the confirmation receipt. That was my real contribution, though no one would ever know. By 9 p.m., I received an automated email from the bank confirming the trust account transfer. Quiet Foundations. Trust. Deposit $15,000. Balance confirmed. The subject line read, "Transfer complete." I saved it under a folder called "For When They Ask." The next day was the rehearsal dinner at the bride's parents' home. I showed up early, wearing the same navy blazer I wore to his college graduation. The smell of roasted meat and perfume filled the room. Laughter echoed through the hallway before I even reached the dining area. Jason greeted me with a wide grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Dad, you made it," he said. "You didn't need to go formal. This is just family." His fiancée's father clapped him on the back and said, "We're all family tonight." I smiled, but I noticed the seating again. I was near the end of the table beside the caterer's assistant. Jason toasted to the bright future ahead. When it came time for me to speak, I raised my glass and said only, "May you learn the kind of love that lasts longer than applause." The table went quiet for half a second. Then people resumed clinking glasses. When the dinner ended, I stayed behind to help the staff stack chairs. The caterer tried to wave me off, but I insisted. When I handed her the envelope with my payment receipt, she looked surprised. "This is for your portion?" "It's for all of it," I said. "Consider it handled." As I walked out into the cool night, I saw Jason through the window. He was showing off the watch his in-laws had given him, polished silver catching the light. He had their approval, their laughter, their world, but not my respect. That was still in the small box waiting on my counter at home. When I got home, I opened the fridge, poured a glass of water, and sat down at the table. I took out the box and ran my fingers along the paper seam. It was perfect, sealed clean, no sign of what waited inside. Tomorrow, it would sit among all the gilded gifts, quiet and patient. And when the time came, paper and truth would do what anger never could. The next morning, I woke before dawn, ironed my shirt, and placed the box in the truck. The city was still asleep. The sun was a thin line over the horizon. I looked at the mirror, touched the box once, and whispered, "All right, son, let's go teach without shouting." Saturday morning came bright and cool, the kind of weather that fools you into thinking life is simpler than it is. The wedding was at noon, but I was awake by 5. Couldn't sleep. I made coffee, ironed my shirt again, even though it didn't need it, and laid everything out in order on the table. Wallet, keys, red folder, gift box. I checked the envelope inside the box one more time, just to make sure the papers were flat. The notarized deed was there, crisp and final, with the date November 21st printed in blue ink. Under it sat the short letter I'd written about his mother, and the typed note from Marion confirming the transfer to the Quiet Foundation's trust. The house felt still. A small breeze came through the cracked kitchen window and moved the curtains just enough to make them look alive. I thought about what Marion had said. Quiet doesn't mean weak. It means control. By 8, I was on the road. The highway to Barton Creek curved through low hills, still golden from autumn. My old truck hummed steady. The radio played a gospel station I hadn't listened to in years. The preacher's voice said something that stuck with me. You can't plant pride and expect peace. When I reached the venue, I parked near the maintenance shed again, far from the sleek sedans and white limos. A valet started toward me, then stopped when he saw my truck. He just nodded. I nodded back. Inside, the planners were in motion. Florists fixing centerpieces, waiters setting glasses, photographers pacing. Everyone was chasing perfection. Jason stood near the bar, immaculate as always. He had on a black tuxedo, gold tie, and a grin wide enough for the whole room. When he saw me, he lifted his hand. "Dad, you made it early." His voice carried, bright and confident. "Didn't want to be late for the big show," I said. He laughed and slapped my shoulder. "Good one." Then, lowering his voice, he added, "You didn't have to bring anything, you know. Your presence is enough." He said it like someone who had already measured its weight. "I brought something small," I replied. "It fits me." He smiled the polite smile of a man too busy to listen. "Perfect. They'll have the gift table set up by the cake stand. We're sorting gifts by size for the display photos. Make sure yours is labeled, okay?" He said it kindly, but I caught the hint. They were ranking the gifts. I had seen that before. At his engagement party. At birthdays where status mattered more than gratitude. I found the wedding planner, a young woman with a clipboard and kind eyes. "Can you make sure this stays upright?" I asked, placing the box at the back corner of the table. "It's more paper than wrapping," she smiled. "Of course, sir." She didn't even look inside, just positioned it neatly among the others and smoothed the cloth beneath it. As the ceremony began, I took my seat in the third row. Jason stood tall beside his bride, her white dress glowing in the sunlight that poured through the courtyard arches. The officiant spoke about love and faith and the joining of families. I tried to listen, but my mind was on the lake house. I pictured its quiet dock, the worn boards under my wife's feet, the sound of her laughter when the fish slipped the line. When the vows were done and the applause echoed, I didn't feel sadness, just distance, the kind that comes when a bridge burns quietly behind you. At the reception, laughter filled the air. Glasses clinked. Photographers circled like bees. The smell of roasted beef and vanilla cake hung thick around the tables. Diane, the bride's aunt, sat next to me again. "You know," she said softly, "you look calmer than any father I've seen at a wedding." "Maybe calm's the only gift I have left," I told her. She chuckled, not understanding, and reached for her wine. The music swelled. Jason made his grand entrance with the bride, waving to the crowd, soaking in the applause. Every light seemed to follow him. When the DJ announced toasts would begin after dinner, I could already sense the storm building beneath the laughter. He would call for the gifts. He would make a show of it. And somewhere in that performance, the envelope would open, and the truth would finally have its turn. I sat back in my chair and let the noise fade around me. The gift table gleamed in the corner under fairy lights. The small box waited there, quiet as breath, patient as time. The air smelled like champagne and sugar, but underneath it, I could taste something else. The moment before justice speaks. Dinner dragged on longer than anyone planned. The toasts started with jokes, then stories, then the kind of rambling speeches people give when they want to sound wise. I sat still through all of it. Every word floated past me like smoke. I knew what was coming. Jason always saved the spotlight for himself. By 8 o'clock, the sun had dipped low behind the glass walls, and the chandeliers filled the courtyard with soft gold light. The planner announced, "Now it's time for the couple to open a few gifts." Guests clapped and cheered. Jason stood, straightened his tux, and whispered something to his bride that made her laugh. He took the microphone from the DJ. "Let's see what generosity looks like tonight," he said. The crowd laughed again, the easy laughter of people who had no idea they were walking into a lesson. He and his bride began with the large packages. Crystal sets, a painting from her family, an envelope full of resort vouchers. Each gift drew applause. Someone joked, "We'll need an accountant just to list these." Jason was in his element. "And now," he said, grinning, "let's find what my old man brought." He walked to the table, scanning for the small box. His bride followed, curious. Diane caught my eye from across the room and shook her head slightly, as if to ask if I wanted to stop it. I didn't move. Jason picked up the box, turned it in his hands, and smirked. "Light as air. That's my dad, always practical." A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. He handed the microphone to the bride. "Let's open it together," he said. She untied the ribbon and peeled back the paper. Inside was the white card and the plain envelope. The crowd leaned forward. Jason laughed. "An envelope! Maybe it's a coupon for hardware supplies." He tore it open. Silence followed. For a long moment, no one spoke. The letter trembled slightly in his hand as he read. His face changed. A flicker first, then a drop in his jaw. The bride leaned in, reading over his shoulder. Her smile vanished. He cleared his throat and read aloud, maybe thinking it was a joke that would win the crowd back. His voice cracked halfway through. "Son, this house was your mother's dream. It will now shelter those who need it most. Love, Dad." Someone near the front gasped. Others murmured. The photographer froze mid-shot. Jason blinked and laughed again, but this time it was thin and uncertain. "Okay, what's this supposed to mean?" Pastor Lee stepped up from the table beside me and said quietly, "Maybe you should check the second page." Jason pulled out the document underneath. The notary stamp gleamed under the chandelier light. The words were simple and final. Quitclaim deed. Transfer of property to quiet foundations. Trust, executed November 21st, 2024. The planner whispered, "Is this real?" Marion, standing near the back in her gray coat, spoke for the first time all evening. "It's very real. Filed this morning with the county clerk." The bride's father leaned forward, stunned. "You gave away your house?" I stood then, calm, steady. "It was never for sale," I said. "It's going where it can do more good than sitting empty on a lake." Jason stared at me. His voice came out hoarse. "You can't just—" "I already did," I said quietly. "You told people it was yours. Now you can tell them the truth." A hush fell. Even the clink of glasses stopped. The videographer, still filming, didn't lower the camera. Pastor Lee rested a hand on Jason's shoulder. "Sometimes a father's last gift is a lesson, son." The bride's Aunt Diane raised her glass softly. "To lessons," she said. No one laughed this time. I set my napkin on the table and nodded to the newlyweds. "Congratulations on your future," I said, then turned and walked toward the exit. The cold night air hit like a curtain of clarity. Behind me, voices rose, confusion, embarrassment, whispered questions. But I didn't look back. Outside, the stars were just starting to show through the haze. I loosened my tie, stepped into the parking lot, and felt my heart steady for the first time in months. The box, the papers, the laughter, all of it done. The truth had spoken. Tomorrow, the world would know. The air outside the ballroom was cool, quiet, almost peaceful. I leaned against one of the stone pillars by the entrance and listened to the muffled noise coming from inside. A minute earlier, it had been laughter and applause. Now it was silence, punctuated by confusion. Chairs scraping, murmurs, whispers that carried disbelief. Through the open glass doors, I could see Jason standing in front of the crowd, still holding the letter. His bride looked frozen beside him, clutching the empty box. The planner hovered near the gift table, unsure whether to step in. The microphone, still in Jason's hand, gave a faint crackle. He didn't know it was still on. "Dad!" he called out, voice tight. "You can't just— this isn't how you do things." I turned slowly, walked back through the doors, and stopped halfway to the head table. All eyes turned. Even the string quartet in the corner had gone still. I felt the weight of 200 people watching, but I didn't feel small. "Then, how should I do it, Jason?" I asked. "The same way you did? Behind my back, at a dinner table with strangers, talking about what's mine like it's already yours?" He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "Go ahead," I said quietly. "You've always had the microphone." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Diane, the bride's aunt, whispered something to the woman beside her. The bride's father crossed his arms and watched in silence. Jason finally found his voice. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone I know." "No," I said. "You embarrassed yourself when you decided that love was measured in square footage." A faint, nervous laugh escaped somewhere in the back of the room. Pastor Lee stepped forward from the crowd and stood near me. His voice carried, calm and even. "Everyone here, take a moment," he said. "This is not a fight. This is truth showing up uninvited. And truth always sits where it's meant to." The bride's father looked at me. "You're really giving the house away?" "I already did," I said. "The deed was filed yesterday. The Quiet Foundation's trust will take possession Monday morning. It'll be used for transitional housing. Single parents, veterans, people who need a place to start over." I paused, letting the words land. "That's what Margaret wanted before she died. It's written in her notes. She said, 'If we ever outlive our use for it, let it belong to someone who still dreams.'" Diane raised her glass again, softer this time. "Then it's still a wedding gift. Just not the one anyone expected." Jason's bride stared at the floor. "You could have told us," she said quietly. "I could have," I replied. "But you wouldn't have listened. Sometimes paper speaks louder." Marian stepped forward from the back of the room, holding a thin folder. "For anyone who doubts it," she said, "here are the copies of the filings and the county receipt. The transfer is legitimate." She placed the folder on the table beside the cake, next to the ribbon scraps and wrapping paper. Jason's face was pale. "You didn't trust me," I shook my head. "You stopped being someone I could trust when you treated my home like a trophy. I raised you to build things, not just inherit them." The room was silent again. He tried to hand me the papers back, desperate to undo what was already finished. "Take it," he said, voice breaking. "It's yours." "It's theirs now," I said. "And I wouldn't take it back even if I could." Pastor Lee turned to the crowd. "We should give the couple a moment," he said, gentle but firm. "And maybe give the father of the groom some respect for his courage." A few people clapped, hesitant at first, then stronger. Not loud or mocking, just quiet acknowledgement. I nodded once, then looked at my son. "You'll be fine," I said. "You've got everything money can buy. But one day, when that's not enough, you'll remember this moment." The sound of paper unfolding louder than applause. With that, I walked toward the doors again. The cold air met me like water. I heard his voice behind me, small now. "Dad, wait!" I stopped, but didn't turn around. "You have a wife now. Be the man she'll need when the world isn't clapping." Then I stepped outside for good. The night smelled of rain and cedar. The sky over Barton Creek was dark except for the faint reflection of lights from the ballroom windows. I stood by my truck and looked at the building one last time. Through the glass, I could see Jason sitting down, his shoulders slumped, the letter on the table in front of him. His bride rested a hand on his arm, unsure what to say. I climbed into my truck and started the engine. The dashboard clock read 9:17 p.m. My reflection in the windshield looked calm. Older, maybe, but free. As I pulled onto the road, my phone buzzed. A message from Marian. "All documents filed successfully. Confirmation from the county clerk received." "Congratulations, Frank. You did it." I smiled. For the first time in months, my hands didn't shake on the wheel. When I reached the stoplight at the end of the road, I looked back once. The venue's lights glowed like a lantern in the distance. I could still hear faint music through the open window. The string quartet trying to restart the song, trying to bring the night back to normal. But normal was gone. For Jason, the lesson had just begun. For me, the noise had finally ended. The truth had found its microphone. The next morning, Austin woke up quiet. I didn't check my phone right away. I made coffee, fed the neighbor's cat like I always did on Sundays, and opened the back door to let the cool air in. The house felt still but not empty, the kind of peace that comes after you stop explaining yourself to anyone. When I finally looked at my phone, it was chaos. Dozens of missed calls, 16 text messages, 3 voicemails, a few from Jason, some from numbers I didn't recognize, and one from Marian. Hers was short. News outlets already picked it up. "Stay calm. You did nothing wrong." I opened my laptop. The first headline sat right there on the local site. "Father gifts son humility. Wedding surprise goes viral." They had pulled stills from the videographer's footage. Jason standing pale with the microphone, me halfway to the door. The caption read, "He gave his son a house." Just not the way anyone expected. The video had over 400,000 views by noon. Comment sections filled with strangers arguing about who was right. Some called it poetic justice. Some said I was cruel. A few wrote that they wished their parents had half that patience. By afternoon, the calls stopped being just friends. A reporter from Good Morning Texas wanted an interview. A property lawyer from Dallas wrote to say, "That's the cleanest quitclaim I've seen all year." I didn't reply to any of them. At 3 p.m., Marian came by. She stood at the porch, holding a folder and a calm smile. "It's official," she said. "County clerk processed the deed." The trust owns the property now. She handed me the stamped copy. You're free. I looked at the seal. Travis County, embossed, dated November 23, 2024. It caught the sunlight like a coin. I set it on the kitchen counter next to my mug. Thank you, I said quietly. Marianne sighed. Your son will fight this in his head before he ever tries to fight it in court. He knows he can't win. He doesn't need to lose, I said. He just needs to learn, she nodded. He will. That kind of lesson sticks. After she left, I walked out to the porch with my coffee. Across the street, the mail truck stopped at my box. The driver waved. Inside the mailbox, a thin stack waited. Mostly bills. One letter in a thick white envelope. Jason's handwriting. I didn't open it. Not yet. I placed it on the table beside the stamped deed and let it sit. Some words need to breathe before they're read. By evening, my neighbor Tom came over. Frank, you're all over the news, he said, half laughing. You made every son in America nervous, I smiled. Then maybe it was worth it. He leaned on the railing. You don't regret it? No, I said. Regret belongs to people still asking for applause. I just wanted quiet. The porch light flickered as the sun dipped. Somewhere nearby, kids were playing, their laughter echoing between the houses. I thought about Jason at that age, running barefoot on the dock, his mother calling from the porch. At 9 p.m., I finally opened his letter. The handwriting was uneven. Dad, I don't know what to say. Everyone's talking about it. I thought you humiliated me, but maybe you saved me. I'm sorry for forgetting what mattered. I don't know if you'll ever want to see me, but I hope you're okay. No excuses, no demands, just that. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into the red folder with the stamped deed. Outside, the night had settled deep and quiet. For the first time in a long while, I felt like every door I'd locked had been worth it. Monday morning arrived with sunlight so bright it painted the walls gold. The air was still, heavy with the kind of silence that follows a storm once the wind has said everything it needed to say. I made coffee, black and simple, and sat at the kitchen table with the stamped deed in front of me. Justice doesn't always come with a gavel or a judge. Sometimes it comes with a county seal, a date, and the sound of a pen leaving the paper. At 10 a.m., my phone rang. It was Nora, a representative from the Quiet Foundations Trust. Her voice was warm, professional, with a little awe beneath the surface. Mr. Hanley, I wanted to confirm receipt of your property transfer. We completed intake this morning. So it's official? I asked. Yes, sir. The lake house is now trust property number 107B. We'll begin renovations next week. Our first residents will be 2 single mothers and their children by the holidays. I looked at the sunlight hitting the countertop and felt a tightness in my throat. Good, I said. That house deserves laughter again. She paused, then added, The board voted to name the new building the Margaret House, in honor of your wife. We read your letter. My eyes blurred. She would have liked that. After the call, I opened my front door and just stood there, feeling the air move across my face. Every leaf on the oak tree outside shimmered in the light. It looked alive again. By afternoon, I drove to the bank to close out the old maintenance account. Carla, the branch manager, recognized me from when I had set up the trust fund weeks earlier. You're the man from the video, she said, smiling. People keep asking if that was real. It was real, I said. Most lessons are. She laughed softly and processed the paperwork. The account closed at 2:37 p.m. I took the final statement and tucked it into the red folder under the heading Completed. On the drive home, I passed a billboard for luxury condos, bright letters across glass and chrome. For a moment, I imagined Jason's world. Clients, cocktail parties, words like portfolio and return. He chased symbols. I had chased meaning. Both of us were builders. Only our blueprints differed. When I got home, a small envelope sat at my doorstep. Return address, the Austin County Courthouse. I opened it carefully. Inside was the certified copy of the recorded deed. The embossed seal gleamed like a quiet medal. The top line read, Grantee, Quiet Foundations, Trust. Grantor, Frank Hanley. Recorded, November 25th, 2024, 10:04 a.m. There was something poetic about seeing my name next to a timestamp. The exact moment justice became official. I took the document inside and placed it in the center of the table. Beside it, I laid Jason's apology letter. 2 pieces of paper, side by side, one the product of law, the other of regret. Both proof that truth leaves a trail. Later, as the sky turned orange, I sat on the porch with Pastor Lee. He brought iced tea and said, "It's done. Frank, you built a story that will outlive the noise." "I didn't build a story," I said. "I just stopped pretending," he nodded. "That's what most people call justice." The evening light hit the porch rail, golden and calm. For the first time, I didn't feel like I'd lost a son. I felt like I'd given him back to the kind of truth that might save him someday. Justice wasn't revenge. It was a clean ledger, a signature that meant, "This ends here." The headlines faded, the comments stopped updating, and the world moved on to its next story. But for me, life didn't return to what it was. It became something simpler, lighter, honest. Most mornings, I drove down to the river trail with a thermos of coffee and watched the water move. The ducks glided without effort. The air carried that cool Texas winter smell, cedar, smoke, and faint sweetness. Sometimes people recognized me. An older woman once stopped and said, "You're that father from the video, aren't you? You did what most of us only dream about." I smiled and said, "All I did was sign my name." Around mid-December, I received an invitation in the mail. Cream-colored envelope, gold script. It was from the Quiet Foundations Trust. They were hosting a ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Margaret House. They wanted me there. The morning of the event, I put on my best gray jacket, the one my wife had always said made me look like I still had somewhere important to go. The drive out to the lake was peaceful. When I turned down the old gravel road, I almost didn't recognize the place. Where our house once stood alone by the water, there were now 2 small cottages with white shutters and blue trim. Children's laughter echoed from the yard. Someone had planted flowers along the porch rail, the same kind my wife used to grow. Nora met me near the gate. "Mr. Hanley, you came," she said, shaking my hand. "We weren't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "But Margaret would have wanted to see it finished." She led me to a small group gathered near the steps. A banner hung above the porch that read, "Welcome home, families." I saw 2 women holding hands, each with a child standing close. They were the first residents. When it came time for the speech, Nora said a few words about community and giving. Then she turned to me. This started with one man's quiet decision to turn his pain into purpose. "Mr. Hanley, would you do the honors?" I didn't prepare anything. I just looked at the faces in front of me, strangers who now carried a piece of what used to be mine. "I built this place once with my hands," I said. "Now it's been rebuilt with hearts that know its worth." My wife always said homes are meant to hold more than furniture. They're meant to hold peace. So, if you find peace here, then that's the best use it could ever have. I cut the ribbon and everyone clapped. Not the kind of applause you get at a wedding or a performance. This was soft, grateful, and real. After the ceremony, a little girl ran up to me holding a drawing. It was a blue house by a lake, the sun shining overhead. "I live here now," she said proudly. I smiled and told her, "Then, take good care of it for me." As I walked back to my truck, I glanced at the water. The dock was still there, repaired and sturdy. For a second, I could almost see Margaret sitting at the edge, her feet in the water, her hat tilted against the sun. I whispered, "We did it, love." Then I stood still letting the wind off the lake carry that peace back through me. What started as humiliation had ended as healing. I finally understood something she'd said long ago. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about letting yourself off the chain. It was the first week of January when the last twist of this story arrived. Quiet, unannounced, and heavier than it looked. I was sitting at the kitchen table with the morning paper when the mail slid through the slot. Among the usual bills and flyers was a small padded envelope, my name written neatly across the front. No return address. I opened it slowly. Inside was a folded cashier's check for $10,000 and a note written in Jason's handwriting. Dad, I went to see the Margaret House. I met the families living there. I thought I'd feel angry, but I didn't. I felt small, the right kind of small. I remember Mom teaching me to sand the deck out there when I was 12. You told me that real wealth is what you build when nobody's watching. I finally understand. This money isn't a repayment. It's a start. I want to keep funding that trust in her name. If you'll let me, I'd like to help maintain the place. Repairs, paint, whatever needs doing. I'll bring tools, not a tie. I promise. Love, Jason. I read it twice before setting it down. $10,000 wasn't much to the man he had become, but it meant something far bigger. Humility had finally reached his hands. I folded the check and slipped it into the red folder beside the deed and his first apology letter. The folder had started as a collection of evidence. Now it was a ledger of growth. Later that afternoon, I drove to the bank and met Carla again. I handed her the envelope. Add this to the Quiet Foundation's account, I said. She smiled. From your son? Yes, I said. From the same boy who once thought small gifts didn't matter. She nodded. Seems he learned. On my way home, I stopped by the grocery store and bought 2 cups of black coffee to go. One for me, one for the empty seat beside me. Old habit. I drove to the lake, parked near the new cottages, and walked down to the water's edge. The sun was setting low, turning the surface into rippling gold. The dock creaked beneath my shoes, same sound it always made, only now repaired with fresh boards. Paint buckets sat nearby, the same blue trim as the new houses. I noticed a toolbox with Jason's initials etched faintly on the side. He had already been there. I sat down on the edge of the dock, the coffee warm in my hands, the breeze lifting off the water. Somewhere behind me, the laughter of children carried through the air. For a long time, I said nothing, just watched the horizon shift from gold to deep blue. I thought about that day at the wedding. His laughter, my silence, the crowd that didn't understand. It all seemed distant now, like an old film reel losing sound. He had mocked a small box. Now he was learning what fit inside it. Forgiveness, dignity, and a deed signed in truth. The wind picked up, and a ripple of light danced across the lake. I could almost hear Margaret's voice again, soft, patient, amused. He figured it out, didn't he? I smiled. Took him long enough? The world around me was quiet except for the lapping water and a bird calling from the trees. I finished my coffee, set the cup beside me, and whispered into the evening air. You didn't lose me, son. You just gave me back to myself. Then I stood, slipped my hands into my pockets, and looked once more at the Margaret House. Lights glowing warm in the windows, children's shadows moving behind the curtains. Justice had done its work, and for the first time in a long, long while, I knew that love, when tested, could still come home in an envelope.